This, ladies and gentlemen, is WeatherBrains, episode number 654. This is the pre-show. This is for, let me figure this out here. Hang on. This is for July 30th, 2018. But you probably know that we're recording this a little early. We're actually doing the show on July the 26th, but it will be posted to the world on the podcast side on July 30th of this year. It's a Thursday night special, which always makes me happy because that means somebody's going to take a week off, and that somebody just might be me. So, Bill.
Yes, sir.
You were off and away Monday. Where were you at the convention? 50-cent beer night? What was happening there?
No, I was returning from Knoxville, Tennessee. So I had
went up there to check out the big orange.
Yeah, I actually go by and see Coach Pruitt and wish him luck after the 0-8 season the Vols had last year. See if he can improve things a little bit.
0-8
in the SEC, I think.
Okay, I thought they played like 11 or 12 games, but you're saying the SEC,
yeah,
they were 0-8.
Oh, that's all that counts.
Just
means more, you know.
I don't think I have their fight song in here. I need to.
You don't have Rocky Top? I figured that came loaded on your soundboard. Like, what is that?
That's Rocky and Bullwinkle. That's Rocky and Bullwinkle, not Rocky Top. Okay,
that's kind of what they were last year. And Natasha and Boris somewhere in there.
I didn't get half those jokes till I was like 20. That stuff was funny.
Yeah, now they're probably appropriate now.
Fractured fairy tales. What a great show that was. Wow. Yeah, I got to clean up the soundboard here.
Rat hole. I don't remember that jingle. When do we use that? In year 3?
That's the rat hole.
Rat hole. Rat hole. 43 folders of rat holes. The weekly mind-breaking rat hole. Totally off-topic rat hole.
Was that made for us, or was that some stock?
It's not made for us, but it wandered in here. It's just when you go down a rat hole, you're off the topic, and you just chase a total rat hole.
We do that all the time.
And the Rickroll. Rick rolling was kind of well, that was like a 10 years ago, wasn't it? Most people don't even know what Rick rolling is now.
Never heard of it.
You
have never heard of Rick rolling, Aubrey.
I don't believe it. No, you lie.
See what? So what happens? Like somebody would send you an email, Aubrey. I have this amazing audio recording of you when you just started your career. It was your very first night on the air. And you get so excited, and you click that button. You can't wait. It's some history. It's part of your life, and you hear this. And it's Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give You Up. That's called Rick rolling.
I've not heard of that, and I don't ever want to see that clip.
It's coming your way tonight. I can guarantee you.
They Rick-rolled the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade one year. It was supposed to be some float with something special. Then Rick Astley came out and started singing and dancing that song.
That's pretty funny.
These things last a few years and they just go away, and then nobody knows the deal.
It looks like we're so sad. Tonight. That's what scares me. Because
we'll make this fly.
Hangout. So
we'll make this thing fly.
Of course we will.
Some classics, just classics here.
Are you deleting these, or are you just reviving them or refreshing them?
No, I'm just looking at it. I've got tabs and tabs and tabs of these things. They're not particularly organized because I've just not paid attention to them. I've got so much in here. But I was looking for the Rocky Top. That's what made me pull it out was.
Were you a Tennessee fan, Aubrey?
I was not. I rejected everything Tennessee.
haven't heard this one in a long time. This is an oldie but a good
Where
one.
has Heidi Cullen gone?
We're not going down that path, because if we do, then I've got to do this. What is this? WTAI 1969 hurricane.
Let's run through now the.
This is for Monday of next week, so this will be up for Monday. So yeah, thank you. MCR checking on us here.
Let's run through now the latest hurricane statement on Hurricane Camille. Dangerous Hurricane Camille stalls temporarily. Hurricane warnings are in effect on the northwest Florida coast from Fort Walton to St. Martin.
That's Brian Norcross. I know what that
That's
is.
right.
That was
That's right.
Brian when he was on the radio in 1969. That was Hurricane Camille. Kevin, you were not even alive in 69, were you?
Yes,
Were you really?
of
Wow.
course.
I was 13.
Mhm.
I stayed up all night that night listening to Nash Roberts on WWL in New Orleans with a little transistor radio under my pillow. It was the most riveting night. It was so exciting, and I was so brokenhearted the next morning when you lose the skywave and the sun comes up and it fades away and you can't hear it anymore. I mean, that's how you used to listen to radio,
What would be fascinating is to take all the material that I guess Brian did and what you listened to and run it back in real time
Yes.
today and and make a comparison, and people would just go, "What is going on?"
I would love to do that. And I guarantee you somewhere WWL has got that recorded. WWL Radio New Orleans.
So was he broadcasting continuously overnight, or just doing cut-ins every couple hours?
Yeah, it was kind of a mix of, they had announcers, they go to Nash, they'd go to the announcers, they go back to Nash. It was just kind of this hodgepodge of probably 10 people. And it was just, as I recall, they probably played a few commercials, but probably not many. And it was just an all-night weather thing. And, back in 1969, the idea of wall-to-wall weather coverage was just unheard of. And
there was just no information too, so you're filling time. It's kind of like doing severe weather here in Wichita Falls. Oh, did I say that out loud?
We didn't. We heard nothing, but the 50,000-watt clear channel radio stations, those AM stations, those were your. That's how you heard it. And in fact, I think JB told a story. He listened to that same night. He was in Colorado, in Denver, and he was able to pick up WWL. It's a 50,000-watt clear channel station, and it rolls in up here at night where I am. But man, those were the days, man. Now it's just like no big deal. You just get on the internet and you watch or you listen to whatever you want to. But I still love the magic of clear channel radio and shortwave radio and ham radio. There's just something magical about it. It's like you're cheating when you do it online. So I think this is probably it. Maybe Tony Rice was going to come on the show with us tonight. I think Bill invited him since we were kind of thin. So Kev, how are they treating you out there? What's happening in
Nothing. It's quiet.
SPS?
We had thankfully we had a very, very quiet spring, which was nice because we were down a person, and that has now resolved itself. But that was a tough spring. I did one day. I think I did 45 minutes. We had one or two tornado warnings. I did 45 minutes literally by myself. There was nobody else in weather. There was nobody in news. It was literally, and we were still at that point fairly new on Max. So I was running back, and it's a good bit between the wall and the computers here. So I just ran back and forth and changed things, and then ran back out to the wall again. It was not my favorite day. We got it done, but it was not the best coverage.
But you were there.
I was there.
Matters.
Yep. And then last spring, I did I ever show this picture? I have to find the picture. I ended up having to do a half an hour continuous wearing my Adidas sweatpants and a National Weather Center t-shirt.
Wow.
Yep.
I would love to see that.
There's a picture somewhere. The general manager was confused. The public liked it. They were thrilled.
All set.
They said it
Hey,
proved
Joe,
that I was there. Oh, look at there.
Hey, Joe, can you hear us?
Legend
I hear you.
online.
I even see you.
Legendary. The legendary.
Man.
A legend in his own mind. Yes, indeed.
Wow.
You know, I try and think back on all the years watching Joe. I think my favorite years when Joe worked Squawk Box with
Oh my
Haynes
God.
and Joe Kernan and all those guys. I love those days. I watch that show every morning. And, you know, it's like, I don't know what they did for weather before they had you on, but you were the first voice, the real voice of science that made sense out of weather for them, because those guys could go down a bad path real quick.
Yeah, those were the good old days. That was 1999 is when we started that news and weather little package deal with CNBC, and you know the market was going crazy, and CNBC was going to be the world headquarters of finance. And a couple years later, we started building a new building, huge building, and and then guess what? The market turned around in 2008, right? Or turned around before that when we had the internet go under about 2002. That was the first.
Yeah,
one.
the internet stocks crashed. Yeah.
You better
Yeah.
start the show. You're getting all this good stuff from Joe, and we're
About to say, let's time out here, because this is the good stuff here. So let me get this thing recording here. And the way we do it on the Thursday night specials, we're already on television. So our television friends have been watching. So if you're on television, thank you for watching. We are about to start this show, and here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, this is WeatherBrains. This is episode number 654. And this is for July 30th, 2018. We're getting set to roll into August. The old dog days are here. Thanks a lot for taking the time to join us. And we should divulge our secret. We're actually recording this a few days early because of vacation schedules. We're doing this on July 26th. The podcast is going to be released on July 30th. But hey, we're glad you're here. But accordingly, we're a little thin tonight, but it's going to be a great show. I'm excited. We've got Kevin Selly, who is out in Wichita Falls, Texas, which can be the heat capital of the United States from time to time.
We hit 104 early in the day before some clouds rolled in and knocked us back. But yeah, that's probably I wonder if that's some sort of record for early high temperature. It was 104 earlier this afternoon. And speaking of four, you said episode 654. I'm thinking to myself, back at episode 4, I thought, this maybe will go 10 shows. And now 650 later.
I divided that on my calculator, and that's 12 and a half years. That's
wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, for those that don't, we started the show this show in 2006, 2006, and this is 2018. That is 12 years. It has been a long run. What was your low this morning, Kevin? What are the lows like there this time of the year?
Upper 70s, near 80. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't remember the exact number. I'd have to go look.
Well, didn't Waco establish an all-time record high last week?
114 the other day. Yes.
Ugh.
We've hit 112 3 times this year so far.
Aubrey Urbanowitz is muted. She might be on the phone or doing some type of business there. Aubrey, how you doing?
Hi guys. Yeah, I'm still building graphics. That's why
Who's
who's
the creeper behind you back there?
This is Chris Holtzman. He is my right side guy. Yep. He does the night shows.
No, don't tell him James called him a creeper.
I will not.
No, anybody behind well, I'm not going to go down that path. He's a creeper to me. So Aubrey, how and let me ask you this: would you have time to do any email tonight? Because we haven't done it in like 3 weeks, and people are getting really cranky.
I can probably squeeze it in after the 10 o'clock show. Yes.
Okay, so we'll do it maybe toward about an hour from now. So we've had a lot of good emails, so y'all just hang tight. We will do an email segment tonight. But Bill Murray, let's introduce our special guest. I'm excited.
Yeah, James,
Extra special.
Tonight's guest brings a weather legend. He spent 4 decades as a broadcast meteorologist. He's a fellow of the AMS, among a million other things. Joe Whitty, welcome to WeatherBrains.
great to be on. I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
So Joe, where are you tonight? Where do we find you this evening?
I'm in lovely downtown Pasadena right now, where we've had our heat during the past 4 or 5 days. Looks like it's going to be hot for another 4.5 days. But the nice thing about desert air, we're almost in the desert here, not quite, but the humidity is so low that it cools down nicely once the sun goes down. And in the morning, it's comfortable. You do your errands in the morning, and then you hibernate inside, because we were 103 yesterday, I think.
So are you near Sheldon and all the Big Bang folks? Are they right there with you in Pasadena?
They must be, but I haven't seen them yet. No, I do watch their show. It's really a great, funny show. I still enjoy that.
Yeah, I think it's funny that they spend so much effort to get the science right. That's really refreshing.
Yeah, there are very few shows that do that, are there?
No, that's for sure. So Joe, take us back to where you got started. You grew up in Seattle. How did you get into weather?
Oh, we all have these crazy stories about we were looking in one way.
Stories, yeah.
Yes, right, and went another way. So my father was a school teacher. So somewhere along the line, teaching was going to be part of my life, even though I denied it in my early days. Lucky, out of high school, I did a field assistant job up on a little glacier in Northern Cascades. And so we would hike up, stay up there for about 10 days, come back down for 4 or 5, go back up. We were studying how the snow was melting, how the ice was melting. And, young, having great fun up in the mountains in the summertime. Oh, this is great. I'll study weather and then work up in the mountains in the summertime. So I found out the University of Washington had a number of professors who worked in that field, up in the Arctic ice and also in glaciers, Blue Glacier on Mount Olympus. And so that's what I started. But the crazy thing is that after I got my degree, it was kind of a hard time to get a science job. And so I stuck around for a master's degree, going up to the Arctic to gather some data. And so I was using a 16 millimeter projector. We put on an aluminum arm. We'd run the film out the arm to a small slit, and that would expose it to the air as we flew by in a Huey helicopter or the Cessna 155 to collect snow and supercooled water droplets. And then we bring that back in, air dry it, and I'd go back to the University of Washington, project that on the wall. Every 10 frames, I'd count. Okay, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 ice droplets, for 4 or 5 supercooled droplets, roll forward. And I was also measuring the heat loss out of the open ocean. And the crazy thing now is they can do that with satellites going 17,000 miles, 200 miles above the Earth, going around the Earth 15 times a day. So in any event, so I was going to be a scientist and teach college, but along came the sort of economic downturn of the late 60s. And after a year at GFDL at Princeton, working on climate models, I didn't really know there were climate models back in those days. I was just happy to have a job, my first paying job. And, I was basically the punch card. People remember punch cards?
Mm-hmm.
You know what they are, right?
Yeah.
We've heard of them.
I know.
Yeah. You know, don't you?
The worst part, Joe, is when you drop them. You just make it out of order.
Yeah, that's just what I was going to. That's why you had to have a master's degree to carry them, you see?
Yes. Yes.
Figured out Joe won't drop them. And that was in the late 60s when Kurt Bryan and Suki Minabe were combining the ocean and the atmosphere model for the first time. Very, very crude models, but 70% of the Earth is covered by ocean. So if you're going to combine them somehow. And so anyway, I came back to Seattle after a year at Princeton, and TV station was looking for a job. And I thought, oh, you know what? I need some money. I need a job, and I'll do this for a couple of years. Then I'll go back to school and work on a PhD. Well, 40 years later, here I am.
Yeah, then
The
you only
rest
got
is
to work
history.
on 3 of the biggest stations in New York City, if not the biggest 3, I guess. Talk
Yeah.
about how did you get from Seattle to there?
Oh, we're all gypsies in one way or the other, aren't we? Thank goodness. So I'm in Seattle. I get a job at King TV, and this was 1971, and I'm replacing a cartoonist who was a heck of a nice guy. And he had learned enough about Seattle weather over his 20 years that, when the weather got serious, he was able to handle it pretty well. But this is a time some of us older folks with less hair on top might remember. Yes, you, James.
Yeah, present company excluded.
Yeah, right. In the early 70s, TV news directors, hey, let's get people with degrees in meteorology and have them do weather. What a concept. So that's how I ended up being on. And back in those days in Seattle, we would go down to the National Weather Service, with a Polaroid, take a 4x5 of the Western Disk.
Wow.
A Polaroid of a facsimile, go back to the TV station, hang that 4x5 on the wall, and then the cameraman would shoot in that. And can you believe where we are today with what we can show the folks?
Crazy.
Oh, yeah. So
Joe, I was going to say, Joe, we did the same thing. I would drive down to the local weather service office where they had a fax machine.
Right.
You take that thing, dip back down to the station, shoot it, and that would be keyed behind me. And that was the way we did satellite back then.
Wow.
Oh, wow. You enlarged it.
Talk more about the graphics. Talk more about the graphics. Well, at that time, tell us more about, because that's fascinating to me. I just don't, I'm a little younger than you guys, but you had the thing that you drove down, you got the picture of the disc. What other graphics were available at that time for a daily show?
We had magnetic boards, right? So we would spend an hour making sure the 45 was lined up, right? And then with the H's and the L's, and put the blue magnetic for cold fronts. Remember those days, James?
I do. And now let me say, see, Kevin, Joe is in a big market. I had to draw. The big market had the magnetic stickers. They had the ones where you could stick them on there. Right. I had to draw with the magic marker and erase it when the show was over. So, Joe is big time.
Yeah, right.
Did you have polarized lights for them to make the rain look like it was falling?
No, but we had some of those. And then, of course, we had Ira Joe across town when I got to New York. I was in Seattle for, 4 years? And then, lo and behold, like I say, this was a hot time to have a degree in meteorology, and even New York was looking for them. And so I got lucky and got called up by CBS in New York. And Ira Joe across town at the ABC station was doing, remember when they do glass and you'd be on the backside and writing backwards? Real high tech.
Wow.
That took some talent too. There was a guy I saw that did that around here. It was stunning how good he was. You had to have this odd dyslexic type characteristic about your personality to do that. I never mastered that.
No, I didn't either. Pretty strange. And then after New York for 4 years, I went down to Philadelphia, and that's when WSI was getting geared up. There's about 79, I think it was, about that. Wasn't that, James, about WSI? We had ESDI with the satellite imagery, right?
What we had was weather graphics by Terry Kelly.
Oh, yeah, Terry Kelly. Yes.
Terry, and again, I think you're right. They were in business too, but Terry started up his business about that time. So we had his system, which was a Chromemco piece of hardware, and they went out of business no telling how long ago. And we had an Apple IIe that came along in the early 80s, and it was like we were on top of the world. I thought this is just too good.
Oh, yeah. That was much better than magnetic numbers and drawing on maps, that's for sure. So, yeah, huge advances. And it just makes you really wonder where we're going to be in, say, just 20 years down the line.
Yes.
And what we're going to be able to show on our iPhones or our, smartwatches or what have you. In the graphic detail. And you've seen that, James, in the radar presentations that we've had.
I think they're working on a chip that's going to be implanted in your forehead, and then that will project the images from there.
There you go. It says, run the ensemble.
Yes.
Whoops, rewind that, please.
So James, talk about that, downloading radar and all that, because it was a different ballgame, because when you got to 13, you had radar from the Weather Service in Centerville, and I'm sure you had to dial that up, didn't you?
Yeah, Joe probably had, at some point had to do this, but we had to dial with a modem, a telephone modem, a phone number to get another radar site that's not yours. And most of those sites could handle maybe 3 or 4 users at the same time. So you would often call and it was busy, especially if the weather was active. And you would call back and you would call back and you would call
Busy
back.
signal.
And it was, that was a nightmare. I remember Hurricane Allen and Bill, what was that, 1980?
1980, right.
And we were trying to get that radar out of Brownsville, Texas. And I think we after 2 hours of dialing the phone, we had different shifts, and finally somebody got through, and it was like the party of a lifetime. We got the stinking image. And we had a receiver from Enterprise Electronics, and the thing was this huge rack. And the truth is, your phones have more computing power than that thing, but
So
it was
true.
a different world. Most people do not understand.
Not at all. Audrey sitting there just wondering, what are these guys talking about? This technology. So remember the fax machines. How many cuts do you have on your fingers with that? Come 11 o'clock, we'd be standing up upside down looking for the LFM to come in, trying to figure out, okay, what do we do? Which way do we go? And of course, you'd always cut your fingers on that swirling device.
Yeah, I know. Now, Kevin's old enough to remember the fax machines. Kevin, surely you remember that.
Sure, yeah, that thing that just would dial in one line at a time, and we would sit and wait for that thing to scan down the page.
That's right.
Yep.
And because we wait for that LFM, to come in, and it had that funky smell to it,
Yep.
and we would hang up the maps on the wall,
Yep.
and they would be wet, and you kind of had to wait for the things to dry. You couldn't write on them. If you did, you'd punch a hole in them.
Right. That is true.
Still, my favorite part was the old dot matrix printers, and that was where the alphanumeric data would come in. And we got to the point where we would sit in that inner office, and you knew there was a watch box coming or something like that. But you got to the point where you could tell by the sound of the dot matrix printer what product was coming in, and we'd yell "box" and run out for the new box to come.
What you missed, Kevin, and Joe was in this era, were the old teletype machines.
Banging away. Yes.
Man, Joe, those things were just sexy. I mean, I wanted one in my house. Those were so stinking sexy. And like Kevin says, they were so mechanical, you could really determine when somebody interrupted the circuit to run a warning or a watch. If cells interrupted it, or if a local office interrupted it, you make this strange pause. You'd hear this strange clacking, and then all of a sudden bells would ring. Had a physical bell in that thing.
That's right.
And,
yes.
Joe, you remember the teletype machines, don't you?
Oh yes. We at the CVS office, we had 3 of them, and we had them encased in acoustic covers to try to keep the noise level down.
Right.
Banging all the time. And yes, do remember those for sure. And then of course, we hand drew some of our maps. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
Joe, you're perfectly timed to have seen all of these evolutions. This maybe isn't a fair question. Are there things that you would have liked to have seen that you haven't seen yet? Does that make sense?
Yes and no. I think some of the virtual reality now that we're able to see, like some of the things that the Weather Channel has time and money to work on.
Right.
Some of it's kind of eye candy, but I love some of the explainers when they show that this is how a tornado forms, or these are the makings of a hurricane. You got your warm ocean water, and so I like I say, I come from a family of school teachers, and so I like the show and tell. And that's excuse me. The second time I was back in New York when we started Early Morning Today, which was just before the Today Show, I would fill in for Willard. He was making so much money, they had to give him more vacation time. So I filled in for him. He's a comedian, so I played scientist, and I'd love doing hands-on demos with Jane Pauley and Bryant Gumbel. And one of the best ones was a Canadian professor had figured out that if you take a clear plastic tube, 6-8 inches in diameter, 6 feet high, fill that with clear Karo syrup, that good thick stuff you put on pancakes. Yeah. And then blow air bubbles down at the bottom. with just a turkey baster, these bubbles would rise slowly enough that you could see them evolve from round circles to flat. And this was essentially a raindrop upside down, right?
Oh, wow.
So you could say this is the real shape of a raindrop. It's
That's
flat.
amazing.
But yeah. So
Okay, so you used the term eye candy a minute ago. Have we gotten to a point where we appreciate all these things, but have we gotten to a point where a lot of these things are too much eye candy for regular folks to grok?
Well, I think we have in some cases, and James has talked about this before, about a lot of our radar imagery that we intuitively understand is like paint splashes on the TV screen. And that's still a challenge, isn't it, James?
It is, and I think, Joe, what the biggest change I've seen here in the last 10 years in the science is this interdisciplinary approach where we're bringing in social scientists to help us. Most everybody here, your background is physical science.
Yes.
We have no training in human behavior, social science, and so we need some help. And we've learned that over the years, and so they've helped us, and I think they will help us in the future, Kevin, to answer your question. What do we need to be showing people during a life-threatening tornado outbreak or a hurricane? Yeah. Do we need to go all in with these cool 3D graphics and virtual reality, augmented reality, or do we need to scale it back and just use video? I don't have the answer to that, but somebody else will.
Yeah. I think it's probably a mixture of both, used at different times. And the great thing that the social scientists have brought us is that we now understand, to some extent, there are so many different audiences, like people with pets. I mean, we all love our pets dearly, and who's going to leave their pet behind in a severe weather situation? And so, from that standpoint, we have a bigger understanding, or better, more deeper understanding about how people react to various things.
It's a very difficult thing to do, because you just said we realize there are different audiences that need different messages, and yet here's one guy on one TV station trying to accommodate all those different possibilities of the way to communicate. It's very, very hard.
It is. And we've got the macho guys out there. Hey, I can survive any storm, I'm going to protect my family here.
Right.
And you've got the fellows who, and we are a mobile society, and a good portion of our audience is new to our neighborhood. And so they've not experienced a tornado in this area. I've not experienced a hurricane of this magnitude. And I always love the question that the reporters asked, hey, have you ever seen anything like this before? Well, if I had, I probably would have left in time, right?
Joe, I have to ask you, I've never had the privilege before of speaking with you, and it's an honor, but I remember from the times I've seen you on TV, you just, and we're all supposed to be happy on TV, but you always seem so genuinely happy and upbeat, and you're that same way now. To what do you attribute that?
Well, it's probably coming from my parents. We're all a reflection of our parents. Not that they were happy all the time, but I think a part of it is I love explaining things as a teacher, and I love. I was a TA in college, and as I said before, that was sort of the one thing as I was in college. I'm not going to be a teacher like my dad. No, I know that's good for him, but I'm not going to be. And then when I was a TA, to be in front of, let's face it, some students are more interested than the others. Some of them are, I'm just going to get a C in this class and get out of it. Others really have this eagerness to learn. And when one of your students, you've probably seen it with some of your interns, when they say, oh, I get it now.
Yeah.
And you really, oh, wow, that is, I like that today. How many interns have you had, James, in your career?
Oh, goodness. Not as many as you, but a bunch. We typically have 3 or 4 every summer.
Oh, you've had a lot more than me.
And they come in from all different colleges, different parts of the country, and it is so rewarding to see them. And the unfortunate thing, Joe, times have changed. Back when we started, we had time, and my time has vanished because now in this digital world, these things never turn off.
That's
right. So, we're having to deal with social media, the digital platforms, videos and blogs and things we couldn't even imagine back in the 80s. And
Oh, sure.
When Kevin, when Kevin looped, Kevin was an intern back in Kevin, 91,
Joe,
92, something like that.
I'm going to take credit for that. I was James' very first
You
intern.
were?
Yes,
Is that right?
And what that means is he made all the mistakes on me, and I took all of those bullets. And everyone who came after that has me to thank.
Oh, that explains a lot now. Yeah,
It does.
My condolences. Yeah.
Yes, it explains. Thank you. Finally, someone understands me. Thank you, Joe.
I do have to tell you this one intern story. So I had an intern. His father was a pilot, so he learned in high school to fly. And he was trying to decide, do I be a pilot or do I become a TV weatherman? Well, I don't know whether it's because of me, but after he was an intern with me, he decided he was going to be a pilot. So, take that. But guess what? Guess what? 10 years later, when the airline business, unfortunately, it was right after 9/11. And so the airline business took a dive, sadly. But he gave me a call and said, do you know of any TV jobs out there? So, they do come back.
So what you're saying to me is there's still time for me to become a pilot.
There you go.
Yes.
Oh, we got sound effects.
Yeah. Oh,
You
yeah.
have no
we-
idea.
Joe, it gets worse from here. Trust me. But I look back on them, Joe, and you're right. Not all of them wind up with a career in, say, operational meteorology, a practitioner. Some of them go on to get a master's or a PhD, and they go into research. They go way, way, way higher up than where we are. And some decide it's not for them.
Right.
But I was going to ask you, Joe, like when you had an intern, how long did you have them, and what were some of the practices that you would have with them? What learning lessons did you give them, and how did you do it?
Oh gosh, looking back at it now, it was pretty unstructured. Nick Gregory in New York was one of my best stories to tell. He was in high school, and back in those days, about 77, before things got too corporate, we were able to take high school students. And Nick was, a weather nut. And he called me up and said, hey, can I get you to come talk to my school? So I went out and talked to his school. Conversation evolved after that. And he said, this summer I'd love to be an intern. And so I didn't check with management or anything. I said, sure, come on down. And you can do the magnets on the wall, right? And back in those days, you're right. We had time we would go over the weather maps, and he was like 17, still in high school. We'd go in the big studio, and we'd tell him where to put we'd work together, putting magnets up and what have you. So it was really pretty unstructured. And but he's one of my prized interns. Later on, it got a little more structured. We had to talk to the news director and said, okay, yeah, they have to go through HR, and they have to be enrolled in college, and a little more formal, which is probably proper from that standpoint. But I look at some of my other interns that I had. James Gregario in New Jersey was a great guy, and a couple others whose name I can't remember. I hope they don't watch this right away off the top. But it was great fun, and like I said, I love sharing the excitement of this great business that we're in.
Yeah, I love hearing from them. I got a note from one today. I got a note from one today that was here 5 years ago, and he's coming into this market, not for me, but for another station. He was very excited, right. And he says, "Look, there's no competition here. I'm just excited to be here." And by the way, let me chase an off. We're going to go down a rat hole here. So you're out there in Southern California, Joe. Do you know Mike Trout?
Mike Trout.
The California Angels baseball player. What Bill? What was it? The Angels? What is it? Anaheim?
I guess now they're the Los Angeles Angels. I remember them as the California Angels.
Yeah, I think they're the Los Angeles Angels.
Okay, I just moved out here, so I'm not up to speed yet.
Okay, we were hoping you had a connection because Trout is one of the biggest Major League Baseball stars in the country, and he is one of the most severe weather weenies in the country.
Oh, really? Yes.
we want to get Trout on this show, Bill Murray.
I need to
so you're
ask
the guest
Alex
booking
Harding.
officer.
So I heard
NBC
Jim
from
Cantori
CBS.
saying that Jim knows Trout and that they text often. Not
There you
awesome.
go.
There you go.
So talk to Jim. And
Okay.
now, James, you know some Red Sox players. You're telling me they don't know Trout?
Well, I will be up there Monday, as a matter of fact. Every year we go to Fenway, and we're going in a couple of days here. So I will plant some seeds. One of the games we go down early. I'm good friends with Mitch Moreland, who's their first baseman, and I'm going to ask these guys. All right, I need a connection with Trout.
Yep.
I need a connection with Trout. We've got this is a 12-year-old weather show. Legacy show here. We want him on this show. So, but I'm trying to work any lead I can get, and this will be, of course, be after the season, which will be in probably November. But I think it's cool, Joe, to see this guy. He's a younger guy,
Right.
He's probably in his late 20s, and every time he goes on television on these sports shows, he's talking about weather.
Really?
He has and so I think it's just cool. So we're going to try and get him on the show.
On your show. Yes, yes.
And also, I was going to mention, too, there's an NFL guy who plays for Arizona, the Cardinals, who loves weather. His name is Andre Smith. He's a big lineman. This guy weighs like 380 pounds.
Oh, my gosh.
I brought him in here to do weather with me one time on the television. We could barely get him on the green wall. But he wants to go back to school when he retires from the NFL and get a degree, and he would love to be the professional meteorologist for ESPN. He comes in there with the knowledge of the NFL, and I think that's a great thing, because those sports networks really need some help when it comes to weather, and I just think that's too cool. But anyway, it just dawned on me, Bill. I'm seeing Joe's out there in Southern California, Trout's out there, maybe. But anyway, we're gonna track down Mike Trout. That's our goal here.
Okay. Yeah, we're gonna crowdsource this deal. We're gonna make it happen.
Yeah.
I love that the Red Sox don't play the Angels again this year, because you could be Moreland could be there at first base after Trout hits a single, and he could just
they could set the deal up right there during the game.
Hey, we're gonna be on WeatherBrains,
Trout. Everybody up the stadium, what are they talking about down there?
So James, how do your interns get to be interns, and what do they do day in, day out? That's an
it's just the same thing Joe's gone through. Joe, I had the same deal like you when we first took in people like Kevin Selly. And Kevin's doing a 9:00 Central Time newscast now. Kevin loved weather. He had a passion for it. And Kevin worked for a local radio station. And he had a great voice, obviously, and he had very excellent broadcasters. So we just took him in. Back in those days, you didn't have to ask anybody.
That's
right.
Took him in, Sure, come on. Free help, you bet.
So now you're right. You got to go through HR. There is an intern coordinator, for the whole news department, and they have to go through all these HR procedures, and they have to have background checks, and it's basically as though you're an employee, even though you're not getting paid for the summer. But so they have to approve all that stuff, and then once it's all approved, and again, because of my time restraints, even within weather, I don't coordinate it myself. We have somebody else in weather that does it, and I do my best to at least spend a few hours a week with them. Sure. And Joe, here's the most bizarre thing I do, and most people that have heard me speak probably know how we do the intern program. And we do a lot of deep science with these guys. We really try and help them to be a good practitioner when they come out of our operation. But one thing we do that's odd, we take them to a Walmart in a working class part of Birmingham. Okay. And the reason we do that, we watch them interact with real people.
Okay.
And the Walmart I like, it's in a part of this city that represents everybody that watches television. You've got high income, low income, people from rural areas, people in the city. It's an amazing mix, this hodgepodge. And we've had some brilliant interns with incredible academics, impeccable academics, and they could not communicate with those people in that Walmart. And so I tell them, if you cannot communicate with them, telling them the weather in the Walmart, you can't do this on television. It's the same thing. You have to be successful at that. So we really work on that Walmart thing. And some, Joe, just admitted that's not their thing. and
Oh,
they
yes, right.
changed they changed it from wanting to be a broadcast meteorologist to working for the National Weather Service or going to work for the NSSL
Yeah.
or NCAR or something like that. And it's good for them. So
Oh, sure. Yeah,
but
that's a good way to learn early.
Yeah.
How your personality fits in this whole thing. And one of the things that I had a huge challenge with, because I came out of graduate school going into broadcasting for the first time, and here we are, this is what, 1971, and I'm talking to a piece of glass. You know, back in those days, the cameras were huge, right? You couldn't see the cameraman back there. All you had was this big piece of glass, and you're supposed to be animated towards that little glass. Here I can see you, so I can animate towards you, James. But that was one of the hardest challenges. Talk to a piece of glass like he's your friend or neighbor or what have you.
Yeah, and by the way, we did, at least we had cameramen back then.
Yeah, that's right.
They're always so funny.
So true, isn't it?
Yeah, we don't have many more. They're all robotic. So you're talking to a piece of glass with no human back there now.
That's right. Yeah, let me throw this in because we're talking interns, and some of your interns watching this may be interested because NASA has a huge intern program, not only at Goddard in Maryland, also down in Houston, also at JPL. At JPL in the summertime, we have over 500 interns. In fact, this is National Intern Day. I didn't know you knew that, but it is. So and the great thing is it's paid. And so if some of you interns want to look at various aspects, because we do weather too, and we do it from space. And so there's a whole host of internships for science interested students. I just pass that along.
That's really awesome. So Joe, we had Joe DeLeo on a few weeks ago. And,
so Joe DeLeo and I worked together when I first went to New York in 1974. He was the weather producer for Gordon Barnes. Gordon Barnes did TV weather on Channel 2 and did CBS radio back in those days. And Joe DeLeo was the weather producer for Gordon. And then, of course, as you know, Joe DeLeo went over to Chicago and worked with our friend from Good Morning America, who started up the Weather Channel.
And you had a little hand in that too. Talk about
crazy.
Talk about your little contribution to the beginning of the Weather Channel.
Crazy. I was in between gigs, as we say. I was working weekends at ABC in New York and filled in for John Coleman on Good Morning America a few times. And this was a time when he was walking the streets of Madison Avenue looking for advertising for his grand idea, what a weather channel. And they said, well, what's it going to look like? So he and John Milan out of Milwaukee and I went to Landmark Station in Las Vegas for a long weekend, and we did a 15-minute pilot. He said, this is what it's going to look like. We're going to have this wheel. And so I take credit for all those jobs that are there at the Weather Channel.
Yeah, we should have had you on the show that night. It was interesting to talk about all that history. It was fascinating.
Joe's got a great deal of history behind him. And then he went up to Vermont, right?
Right.
Was teaching up there. So where is Joe now? I've sort of lost touch of him. Is he up in Vermont still?
Well, they've written a book, and
they have. Okay.
About the pioneers of the Weather Channel. He and Al Lipson were on the show, and it was really fun to talk about all that history. We laughed a lot that night for sure.
Oh yeah, I bet you did.
Now, you've said that one of your favorite TV meteorologists was Bob Ryan. Why was that? Talk about.
Oh well, Bob Ryan has been a leader in our field for a long time, and a lot of the innovations that we see today were promoted and dreamed up to some extent by Bob Ryan, as he was always eager to take on if something came in from WSI and something new. He was an eager user of that. Same with ESDI. And because that was another crazy thing, because in some way I owed my good part of my career because they did this trade job with Bob Ryan and our friend Willard Scott. Bob Ryan did the Today Show from 71 to about 73. And Willard Scott was in Washington, D.C. at WRC. And there was a change at NBC management, and they said, we need something, we need a little levity in the show, and let's bring Willard in from RC, and let's move Bob trade deal down to RC. He became the local weather guy at Washington, and Bob thought, hey, I don't have to get up at 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. That's probably not a bad idea. And that really worked out well for his career. And he became a spokesperson for weather, really, at many of the congressional hearings. And then as I came in, I would fill in for Willard a couple of years later during his vacation period. So crazy little connection. But Bob's been a major leader. Oh, were either one of you at the AMS meeting this last year when we honored Bob?
No, but we heard about it.
You heard about it.
I was not, but I wish I was there. The last time I saw Bob was at an AMS annual meeting,
right,
and we spent a lot of time together. And Bob was one of my heroes, Joe. I mean, he was one of the first ones on national television. And I watched him back on the Today Show, back when before Willard flipped.
Yes.
And he was just riveting because the guy knew what he was talking about.
Exactly.
He was teaching. And for a kid that loved weather, I was just sucked into that.
Yeah.
And again, Willard's a great guy, but it was kind of disappointing because back then when he went to Channel 4, you couldn't see him except if you were in Washington, D.C.
Right.
So getting to spend some time with him, later in life was just thrilling. And it's great to see Bob's still active and he's, involved and he's on social media. And I'm sure glad he was honored because if anybody deserves it, Bob Ryan does.
Bob does. And remember, he became president of the AMS. So we had a real spokesperson for our aspect of meteorology right there at AMS headquarters.
So Joe, what was your most memorable weather event?
Oh gosh, it could be as big as a lady writes me a letter when I'm at Channel 2 for about maybe, let's see, I arrived in the summertime. Yeah, it was that following spring. So I'm there for about 6 months. A lady from New Jersey writes me a letter. She's probably a senior citizen, as I see by the handwriting, a little rough still. And says, I paid $16 for the tomato seeds and the frost came and you said it wasn't going to be frosty. I'd like a refund, please.
Did you mail her a check, Joe?
Well, I wrote her a nice note. How's that? Looking back at it, I should have sent her a $20 bill, but back in those days, that was big money, right? And of course, a couple other ones, flying into hurricanes. When I was at KYW in Philadelphia, I had a chance to fly in a hurricane, but I had to get to San Juan first. So flew to Miami, then to San Juan, but the Hurricane Center folks were evacuating. So, and had to jump a ride with them back to, was it Miami or was it the Air Force Base? I think it was the Air Force Base. And they had another plane going out. So I jumped on that. We went just near Puerto Rico because that's where the planes had evacuated, and then got back. So it was a 48-hour trip, and I just made it just in time. About a half hour before the 11 o'clock news, we threw some video together. It was Friday night at 11 o'clock, and so that was my experience of flying that hurricane. So that was one of the stories and the experiences that was great fun. James, how many have you flown in?
I've not done a single hurricane trip.
You've not? You're right down there, guy. Come on.
We send Brian Peters down there because he's expendable. He's expendable. No. One before I die, I want to make that happen. Hey, Joe, what was your favorite market? So you've been in like Seattle and Milwaukee and New York and Philadelphia. What was your favorite local market when you worked local television?
Oh gosh, the thing you find out is people are great no matter where you go. And one of the great things about our business is it's fairly easy to make friends just because people recognize you. And an easy way to start a conversation. They may give you a bad time because of weather forecast, but in any event, it varies things, shopping at Walmart, what have you. And so I've worked in Seattle, I've worked in Milwaukee, I worked Philadelphia, I worked New York, I worked Washington. And crazy, don't tell anybody, but when we got a job in Milwaukee, I sort of had to get out the atlas and show my wife where Milwaukee was and said, okay, this is where we're going, dear. It's in the middle of the country. We've been to Seattle. We've been to New York. Guess what? But our daughter was, 3 years old. It's a great family town. We really enjoyed some wonderful folks there. And so each market, Philadelphia was great because we had a chance to live right 2 blocks away from the station, right there in Old Town, Philadelphia. And we're coming from Seattle, where 1872 was an old thing. And here we are walking in the neighborhood where Ben Franklin and all our founders basically created our country as it is. And of course, New York is a totally different experience altogether. Just got to make sure you get out of town every so often. Otherwise, you start taking on those attributes.
Talk about Hurricane Gloria for a minute. That was a big hurricane in your past, Joe.
That was. Wow, that goes back a while. What year was that now?
86, maybe?
86? Okay. Trying to figure out where.
It was when I was in Dallas, so I want to say maybe it was 85.
Okay, mid-80s. Okay.
Yeah, it was mid-80s because that was the time they flew me on a Lear jet to the National Hurricane Center. I was in Dallas, Joe, and they TV stations made so much money back then.
Oh,
they didn't
those
know
were
what
the
to do
days,
with
weren't
that
they?
money. Those were the days. My news director called me up, and again, this is Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. Okay,
Right.
had nothing to do with this thing, but my news director called me at 11:30 that morning, and he said, "You got a live shot today." And I said, "Okay, where is it?" He said, "The National Hurricane Center." And I said, "No. Where is it? I need to know." And he said, "The National Hurricane Center." They had a Lear jet waiting on me at the Addison Airport. They flew me down there, and we got there at 4:30 and did the live shot at 5. So. But, I just obviously it didn't affect me, but it probably affected you at some point in your career there. That was a pretty big East Coast storm.
Oh, yes, it was. And I'm trying to remember, let's see, where was I? Was in, I was at NBC New York at the time and doing the early morning network show and then doing the morning local show. And that was a big one because it went right through central Long Island. And basically, we hadn't been hit for a long, long time. And so there was a lot of excitement and confusion about, oh, my God, what's this going to do? And everybody was referring back to the hurricane of 1938. And we had visions of that sort of damage. But of course, we had much more warning than they did back then and much more prepared. So that was an experience. The other one that when I was at Washington, D.C., I had just arrived and let's see, this had to be about 2003, started with Irene.
Isabel.
There you go.
Yeah,
Thank you. Isabel came through and I talked to, and it'd been a while since DC had been threatened. So I talked to the news director. He says, look, we've got a 35-story building here. And we need to get a camera up there, get some rope to tie us in so we don't get blown off the roof and over the side, and get some shots up there. So for them, that was a big deal for them to get up and outside their station. So the other one I do remember is when I was on the NBC Sunrise show and John Dancy was anchoring, and I flew with it was with the Air Force, and we flew into the eye just as it was coming on shore. And half hour later, we wouldn't have flown into the storm at all because it was getting over land. And I want to say Diane, memory's failing me, guys, here. But we were able to do a live audio, and this had to be like 83, 84, live audio from the eye of the storm back to NBC News at sunrise. But the crazy thing was, it was as calm as could be. There wasn't any turbulence whatsoever. I mean,
Wow.
Not only in the eye, but getting to the eye. There was basically pretty flat by then.
So Aubrey, can you talk, or are you? No,
I don't think she could talk.
She can't talk.
Yeah, she's got a newscast going on right behind her.
Oh, she did. Okay, all right.
Well, you had to run into some big blizzards, Joe. What were some of your favorite blizzards?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. What was it? Was it 78? I skied down Fifth Avenue to go to work. I think that was.
Wow.
And, and of course, there was nobody on Fifth Avenue that early hour of the morning. But the ski down Fifth Avenue from the upper 80s was an experience that always brings back joy. And of course, as you know, big cities like New York and Washington, D.C. are not like the big cities of Milwaukee or Chicago or Boston when they get snow. They just go panic, especially Washington, D.C. What was it? What year was it we had all those big storms in Washington, D.C.? Had to be about 07 or something like that. And just one storm after another storm. And the city of D.C. just shuts down. They were just frozen solid.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Joe, what's your biggest challenge in forecasting East Coast nor'easters? You've dealt with these things. I mean, what tips can you? Let's say that you got a newbie coming into New York or Boston, Baltimore,
Right.
or Philadelphia.
Right.
What are your tips on forecasting nor'easters? The rain snow line. You know, it looks like a nightmare.
That's always the challenge, that rain snow line. And Joe DeLeo was one of the first ones that pointed that out to me. You know, I'm coming from Seattle to New York, and in Seattle we get snow once every 10 years or so, and then it's a big deal. It's pretty easy because it's a big cold blast coming in from the east. And so I'm coming to New York, and I'm not familiar with the cold air damming that goes along with the mountains there, and the fact that the ocean is on the other side of where I am. That was one of my first challenges when I was in Seattle. The ocean was over here, but in New York, the ocean was over there. And I would say, well, the Atlantic Ocean, I mean, over there. So, but that rain snow line. And back in those days in the late 70s, you know, we didn't have a great deal to work with. So we were challenged by that all the time. And of course, still have that rain snow line problem these days, all the way from Washington, D.C. through Philadelphia, Baltimore, up through New York, and not so much at Boston, but sometimes at Boston. I had to chuckle at Harvey Leonard. Harvey Leonard gave a presentation about that big year he had with all those snowstorms in Boston. And he gave a presentation, and it was just, and then came the next one, and then came the next one after the other.
So, Joe, now you're a climate educator at NASA. Talk about what you do now.
Well, basically, what I love to do now is NASA is doing some great science. A lot of it is really, it's not operational. It's really experimental, and a lot of the instruments that they use are one of a kind. They really have to build them in the lab and test them in the lab, test them in the cold room, test them on the planes, test them with heat, because in space you've got to go from minus 250 to plus 250 degrees. And one of the things we're launching in September is ICESat-2, and basically it's a polar orbiter. We'll circle the globe pole to pole. I think it's about 300 miles above the Earth. Could be a little less, could be a little more, but it circles the Earth 15 times, and basically using lasers it can measure how high the ice is, whether it's over the surface of Greenland or over the surface of Antarctica, or whether it's the glaciers in Alaska or Canada or the Tibetan Plateau, and we get a measure of how the ice is fluctuating or not, if it's melting. We have the OMG program, which is Oceans Melting Greenland, OMG. And basically what we're finding out there, what the scientists are finding out, is that as the ice shelves and glaciers come to the water's edge on Greenland or Antarctica, some of the slightly deeper ocean currents are coming in on the underside of the snouts of the glaciers, so to speak, and melting them from underneath. And you say, well, gee, that ocean water ought to be freezing, isn't it? Well, it turns out down a couple hundred meters or so, there's a little water that's a little warm enough to melt some of the ice. And so we're not quite sure how those currents, and they're not everywhere, but how those currents are eating away at some of the glaciers. And so we're just learning a heck of a lot about that. We just set up an EcoStress satellite about a month ago, and basically it is now perched on the International Space Station, which we're using more and more as instrument platforms. And EcoStress will be able to help the farmers of America determine when their plants are starting to get stressed. Now, our farmers in America are pretty well instrumented, and they have a pretty good idea of the water budget and water table in the evapotranspiration that's taking place. But other parts of the world are not as up to speed with this. And so this will give farmers around the world an early warning of your crops are starting to get stressed. And so what they're measuring, rather than waiting for the leaves to die because of lack of water, they're able to measure, oh, the crops are not transpiring enough moisture. They're not getting enough moisture from the ground. And therefore, this region, as we suspected, is being stressed. And so it's going to give farmers in another decade around the world more tools to help manage their crops. We set up, what did we send up? Oh, we set up, here's a crazy one. The GRACE satellite is 2 satellites. They're about 120 miles apart. Yeah, 120 miles apart. They fly at about 300 miles. Same idea, polar orbit, circle the globe 15 times a day at about 17,000 miles an hour. And basically, they're not sending down any signals to Earth. They're measuring the distance between each other. So as the one goes over, say, the Rocky Mountains, which is a rocky mass, has a little more mass than the Great Plains, it speeds up a tiny bit. And then as the next one comes along, it starts to speed up. And then they start going back to the original position after they pass the mountains. And so they can measure the distance between these two of less than a tenth of a hair. Less than a tenth of, well, I used to have hair up here. And so by measuring each month, they can figure out how much mass of groundwater is in the aquifers in central US or California or India or anywhere around the world, and also the mass of ice over Greenland or over Antarctica. Are we losing or gaining mass? And it's given us a whole new way. It was sort of 10 years ago, it was sort of like a test idea. This ought to be doable, but do we have the accuracy? And this new pair is now giving us 10 times more accuracy. And so we'll be able to monitor, like places like the Middle East that really water shortage and critical, will have a much better measure of how the groundwater is doing. And like northwestern India, millions of farmers are basically pumping water out of the groundwater supply because they need water for their crops. Now, if they have a successful monsoon, they don't have much of a problem, but they don't. And so groundwater in parts of India is very critical to the long-term future. And groundwater over a lot of the world is critical. And here in Southern California, especially, I mean, the Central California Valley is the bread and vegetable basket, Great Plains is the bread basket for United States. And we are sucking more and more groundwater out, so much so that the ground is physically sinking in some places a foot to 18 inches. And so in the long-term future, to be sustainable, we'll need to figure out how can we help try to balance some of these things. So there's just some incredible science that they're doing. And some of that is passed on, of course, to the National Weather Service. So we have the instrumentation. And I understand they're still having problems with the GOES satellite and some of their instrumentation still. So hope they're able to solve that problem.
So James, I think that Joe needs to bring his Cairo syrup and his turkey baster to St. Louis, and he can be in your stage show at the Weather Ready Fest on Saturday, August 25th.
Tell me about your stage show.
Yeah, we're really excited about it. The whole event's going to be huge. But
did he have that at Norfolk? Did I miss
no,
that? No,
this is a new development. We did it last year in Orange County.
Okay.
With Alex Tardy, the National Weather Service WCM from San Diego. He did a fantastic job. But it's Ali Skywarn and talking about flash floods. It'll be James and Ginger Z.
Oh, great.
Sort of the Ginger Rogers and Fred Astaire of weather. And I think
Beauty and the Beast.
Bring your turkey baster and join them, Joe.
I wish I could come, because I had so much fun at Norfolk, because that was a great weather fest you put on.
All right. So I was going to say, Joe, you've made this kind of transformation into PR working with NASA. And I'll say this, I think your television background helps so much, because out of all of when I get an email from you, it's useful. It's good information. The email, when I see it's from you, it's good. So you have mastered the art of getting information out to us that's usable and it means something. So you've made a really good transformation into the PR world, working for NASA and some of these folks like that. I don't know what you did, but it worked.
Well, thank you very much. That's I really appreciate that, because one of the things I looked at as I was trying to figure out what to do in sort of my fourth career here was figured out, oh gosh, I love doing science stories, but I didn't have the time to produce them. I didn't have the time to get a crew. And so what we needed to do was to be able to produce science stories, weather, space science, what have you, and have them, basically a lot of the science that we do is just voice over. Hey, here's something new we learned today. In 30 seconds, we do a who, what, when, where, why, and this is kind of cool. Look at this. We didn't know this before, and this will help us. This will help the farmers or what have you. And I was going to go to CNN in about 2008 and say, hey, this is what you could do for all your affiliates. But then in 2008, the economy tanked, right?
Yeah, it crashed.
They fired Miles O'Brien and all the science crew there. I said, well, I got to come up with another idea. But basically, and it's the NASA news releases are still somewhat old-fashioned. There's one-pagers, and they're writing for different audiences. They're writing for the Andy Revkins, who are going to dive deep into that. They're writing for headquarters. They're writing for their bosses. And sometimes all we have time for in this business is who, what, when, where, why. And so I will basically what I tell NASA, I take your great candy and pass it on with just a few little edits and try to make it easy. So when you have slow weather days, you have something else to talk about.
Right. And so you've lived in the world where you get 2 or 3 minutes on the air.
Right.
And
yes.
You can't do a 1 hour documentary when you do what we do. You live in a very you take trinkets of information and you can pass that on. So you having walked that walk, it really helps us. But tell you what, guys, let's take a pause here. Aubrey, sure. Are you able to talk now?
Yep, I'm good.
Okay, so which means before we do anything else, we're going to roll this because I have a funny feeling that we just might have some emails to read this week.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
All right, sifting through the old email inbox. So for this one is from Bradley Lampkin from Virginia Tech. Hey, someone on the East Coast. Virginia Tech does have a very good meteorology program now. Thanks for producing an amazing show. This was on July 20th. So still a pretty recent email. I don't think it's been mentioned on the show, but Dr. Greg Forbes officially announced his retirement in early July. Greg Forbes is an inspiration and hero to me, as he is to many of us. Taught me almost everything I know about severe weather, especially radar meteorology. When he stated that he will be back in a limited role next spring, he will thoroughly be missed on active days like today. From all of us in the weather community, we wish him a happy retirement. And Bradley was actually the first. I didn't know that either. I heard that from the first time from Bradley. So thank you.
So Bill, get him on the show.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I've got a long list after this night.
I'm about to say
Dr. Forbes. Good Lord.
No, good. Dr. Forbes and I can fuss about Torcon together. So that'll
there
be fun
you
in
go.
itself. But no. Greg is brilliant. And, he's had a great career. And again, I would love to have him on the show. I wonder who's taking his place as the severe weather guru of the Weather Channel.
Doesn't Carl do some of the severe weather? Carl Parker?
I don't know.
Bring back Dr. John Scala.
Ooh.
Dr. John Scala. He'd be a great choice. We got to get John's back on this show.
Yeah, we do.
Bill, get him on here too.
Yes, sir.
All right, and add this to the list. KATV's Ned Perm. Is it Perm or Permy?
Permy.
Permy. Arkansas's most iconic meteorologist is retiring, wrapping up his 40-year broadcasting career. So he is retiring. Also works for one of James's sister station, I hear. So Robert.
Yeah, he works for KATV in Little Rock, and he's been on the air for a long time. You know, he used to work in Mobile, Alabama, but and I think, Aubrey, we have another retirement too that kind of ties into this. I don't know if there was an email about it, but Tim Heller, Tim in Houston. Wow. You know him, don't you, Joe?
Yes, I do. Great guy.
I think he's
call
retiring.
him on the show for us, Joe.
yeah. We're going to dump some of this on Joe.
Okay, I've got Mike on my list. Tim's on my list. Okay.
Yeah, but I would love to have a show with these that are retiring on their thoughts of their career and talk about, you know, the good, the bad, the ugly, the highlights, the lowlights, and I think that'd be a good show. But we'll see.
On September 24th, we've got Ben Pringle, who just recently retired from Tulsa.
Okay.
Wichita, I think. So he's going to be on the 24th of September. That'd be good.
Okay. So, Joe and I are never going to retire. We'll be like 95. Yeah. We'll retire one day.
You'll retire when you can. You'll retire when you don't understand the new technology, James.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, you're right.
How many guys do you think actually that happens to, where they go, it's too much changing, I'm going to leave?
I don't think I'm
done with it.
Fan, Mr. Early Adopter.
Yeah. Well, I've said a few times that, you know, high definition TV is here. It's time for me to bow out.
All right, this one comes from David Holcomb. Greetings. The last email I sent was a meme of James Spann, but David also sent us a satellite image of Hurricane Chris, so that's how long it's been since we've done the email segment. The GOES visible satellites, the eastern outer bands seemed alien and inhospitable. Looked like something out of a movie I would not want to be in. So that was actually kind of a picturesque storm as it did move off the coast. So that's awesome. Ashley Ross from Fresno, California. Thank you guys for the latest episode 651, the early days of the Weather Channel. I'm excited to have learned I was born the year the Weather Channel started and to hear the background of how and why. So we appreciate that. So Ashley, a big fan of the Weather Channel and those series. Chris White sent us, who we had on the show last week, sent us an article on the DoD's need for satellite weather data. Let's see. Steve Holmes from Iowa City, Iowa, sent us a pick of the week. The Munich reinsurance company, virtual reality tornado striking a home to encourage people to take tornadoes seriously. Do you guys think that this new virtual reality stuff will maybe wake a few people up?
What do you mean?
I think it can if it's used right.
Yeah.
And I'm not so sure we know how to use it right.
With the virtual reality, like the stuff that the Weather Channel has in now, showing really kind of in high detail, as if you were in that storm, it can be quite eye-opening. A lot of it gets too confusing, I think, for regular people. It just becomes it's like the old bucket of spilled paint analogy. If you use it simply, I think it's highly effective, but I think we tend to get enamored with what we can do as opposed to what we should be doing sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like the radar 3D thing, where you just go all 3D and you and you don't even know where these echoes are. You can't find it on some base map. It's just these floating,
right.
Right. I mean, yeah.
All right, and a sad email. This one was sent in from Daniel Lucas, who often sends us some very interesting links. I won't say good links because this is a very sad story. A sportscaster dies in a deluge near Des Moines in early July. A Drake University sports broadcaster tried to get out of a stalled van during the heavy rain, and he didn't make it with this heavy line of thunderstorms that moved through 3 to 8 inches. That article was from the Capital Weather Gang. So hate to see that. James Elrod, I would like the recommendations of the brain trust of a service or app that would send severe weather notices to me.
Bill, you got one. Go.
Yeah, my warn is back out and running beautifully and sending warnings out in about 3 seconds to very specific polygons issued by the Weather Service. So we're really proud of it. You go, it's on the Apple store for $9.99 for a limited time for its lifetime. So I think that's really the future is being able to deliver those warnings to very specific locations. Of course, there's WDT has a great app, and so pick the one that works best for you. But my warning is very specific and very limited to just severe weather warnings, just flash flood, tornado, and severe thunderstorm watches and warnings.
All right, James, you heard it there. I know our station has a new app, and it actually does a very good job. Not all TV stations have good apps, but many TV stations have some good ones. And I've been told by even some of my coworkers that they'll take this out of town, and it actually does a really good job of the forecast out of town, much better than their generic or other weather app that comes on.
Crap app is what. See, Aubrey's. So plug it. What? How do you find it on the App Store? What do you search for?
Ours is the WHSV weather app. So you search for WHSV weather, and I tell you, until I started having to build these new graphics for our new graphic rollout that's coming, I am super obsessed with this thing, and I have worked with our web guy. WSI hates me because I email them all the time, and I've really customized this, and I really want to put on here things that will make us stand out and things that people are interested in. I post a lot of weather history locally, national weather stories. I want to get an astronomy section and just things that people ask about all the time. The drought status, precipitation for the month, the year, all sorts of interesting things that we have in-house and that we can just push out in these apps. And of course the warnings are really great also.
So is this it right here?
Yep, that's it. And the one thing I like is, if you're out at an event or you're out at a festival, and instead of constantly looking at radar all the time, the notifications come to you and it says, hey, heavy precipitation nearby. You might want to get under cover. It doesn't say that, but lightning nearby and stuff like that. So really good if you're kind of out and about, and especially if you're out doing outdoor activities. That's it.
And Aubrey, get with me about some weather history. I've got a really cool new thing that you can utilize.
Ooh.
It's coming out here in just a couple of weeks. We're going to put it on our blog, and I'm really excited about it. So you might find some use of it.
Awesome. I am compiling some really good local weather stories over the years. I found some great people and really compiling those. So that's really cool stuff. So I will do one more email before I go. This one is from Max Shaw. Dear WeatherBrains crew, I've been digging through some information on the April 1974 tornado outbreak, and I came across a couple of interesting documents concerning the event. The first is a survey that Dr. Fujita sent out to the public following the outbreak. The second is an assessment done by NOAA in which they discuss the things that did and didn't go well during the outbreak. Very interesting. Thanks for making Mondays a bit more tolerable. So thanks, Max. And I would love to get my hands on a copy of the Fujita hand-drawn map. Fujita has some amazing drawings, and I would love to get some copies to put in here in our weather center. If anyone knows where I can get copies.
I bet you Joe knows where you can find them.
Is that an age-related reference you're making?
I'm just saying, brother. It's either
Just
me or
saying.
you, and I pick you. Yeah. By the way,
Go ahead.
Go, Joe.
Oh, did you see a couple of downburst videos this past week? Really amazing shots.
Yeah.
You say, oh, wow, Fujita was right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Aubrey, did you get the one that came out of this was like today from Austin Gress?
Yes.
This is like you might want to read that. I thought this was interesting. You might read that one, and I'd love to hear Joe's response to this.
All right. Yes, you're right. It is a good one. Austin Gress from Oklahoma is a student at the University in Oklahoma. Of course, Oklahoma University, specifically for meteorology from Iowa. But unfortunately, Austin has changed from meteorology to elementary education because he was really struggling with the calculus and was down on himself. And so he decided to change. Well, within the last year and a half, Austin got into storm chasing and really likes to be out there because he's still fascinated with the weather and what it brings. So recently he's kind of felt upset about switching because it kind of feels like weather is his true passion, but because of the calculus, it's something he, has a hard time getting over. So I'm starting my 4th year at OU, and I feel it's too late to do anything. Let me tell you, I went back to school for meteorology at 26, so it's never too late to do anything. And Austin's question is, what are some ways that I can stay within the weather community through storm chasing or to kind of fill that void that he's missing? Any help or advice?
Yeah, Joe, what are your thoughts on that? So he couldn't handle calculus, but he wants to stay active in weather, maybe as a hobbyist. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. Oh, I would say stick with it, because one of the most important things I think we all find is find something you love to do. And if you find that thing, then you'll find ways to make it work. And it's not easy oftentimes. I went back to school at age 68, so tell him he can still do that. That's
there
not
you
a
go.
problem. Yes, right. And and look, just sort of makes me think about all the different careers at JPL or NASA. I used to think, oh, they're all rocket scientists. No, they're not. There are engineers, there are atmospheric scientists, there are people in ecology, there are people in chemistry, there are a whole host of different things. For instance, we were talking earlier about social sciences, right? Well, storm chasing and social science are really tied together. And so that might be one way he could put his interest and his skill set to work. Just an idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great suggestion.
Yep.
But thanks, Aubrey. So we'll wrap up this email segment.
Stick with it, because if you're coming back to it, if that's your true passion. I don't use calculus every day.
Yeah, right.
We don't use calculus every day. So
No.
just get through the classes to get the degree and then move on. So if you can do everything but the calculus, then you're good.
Yeah, right.
So, all right. So that's our email, and we'll read a few more next week, and we'll add to it, or the week after next. So if you have an email for us, guest suggestion, a link, something cool we should see, or what you like or what you don't like about the show, send us an email at weatherbrains.com. You can find us on the Facebook and the Twitter. We do embrace technology here, even though it doesn't seem like it sometimes, but you can always email us, at weatherbrains.com.
Okay, so we're going to pause really quickly for Tony Rice. And again, Brian Peters is out this week, so there's no WeatherBrains 101, but Tony's got an astronomy report. We're going to come back and quickly do picks of the week. We have to be through at the top of the hour here, since we're all doing something TV or something else here. So let's pause for Tony, and we're going to come back with picks of the week as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
In honor of guest weather brain Joe Whitty and his background in glaciology, let's look a bit at glaciers a little bit further from Earth, specifically on Mars. Yes, Mars has glaciers, and a lot of them, mostly in the central latitudes. Calculations in 2015 from radar measurements spanning 10 years, most recently from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, of the amount of ice in these glaciers found enough to cover the entire planet, more than a meter thick. There's also a thick layer of dust on top of these glaciers, and that's just going to get thicker as the current planet is circling dust storm winds down, covering these glaciers so that they blend in with the rest of the surface from orbit. That dust also keeps the ice from evaporating out into space. And that's water ice too, not that carbon dioxide stuff that ebbs and flows at the poles. Like glaciers on Earth, glaciers on Mars are not pure water ice. Like on Earth, they contain a lot of debris, and over the millennia, that's carved the surface of Mars. Geologists also point to river-like valleys on Mars as possibly being formed by glacial meltwater, probably very briny as well, allowing it to stay in liquid form in these cold Martian temperatures. And cold it is. The last low temperature reported by the Mars Curiosity rover near the equator was 84 below zero Fahrenheit. These glaciers have been seen as a possible water source for future human missions as well. Colin Dundas, a geologist with the U.S. Geological Survey in Flagstaff, Arizona, said, "There's shallow groundwater ice under roughly a third of the Martian surface." This can also record recent history of Mars. Elsewhere in the sky, Mars and its glaciers will reach perigee the morning of July 31st. This is also when it'll be the closest to Earth. It'll be big and bright in the sky for the next 2 weeks. Get out and take a look. After 9 p.m., look to the southeast, to the teapot of Sagittarius. Mars will be to the left, shining with a faint reddish color. Saturn will be a bit dimmer above the lid of the teapot. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
So, Joe, I'll give you a fair warning here. We're going to be asking you for a pick of the week. This can be anything related to science, weather, space, you name it. So we're going to come to you last to give you time. Mine, interestingly enough, is from NASA. Some really cool satellite shots of hail damage you can see on low orbiting satellite images across South Dakota earlier this month. And to me, looking at satellite imagery never gets old. I don't know what it is, but there's just something cool about it. And again, all the links will be up on the website, weatherbrains.com. Aubrey, what's your pick of the week?
Mine is also a satellite image that I could not stop watching last night. If you follow NOAA Satellites on Twitter, this is the goes east. There's converging clouds on Cuba's Isle of Youth. And you see this, the convergence, and you can see the convergence, and then the cumulus build into this thunderstorm, and then the outflow, and it's incredible.
No, I've seen that. It's awesome. I will agree. It's addictive. It's just like eye candy. You can't stop watching it.
It's weather
porn. Fascinating about that too is it went up so quickly, but it went down so quickly as well.
No shit.
Yeah. Sorry. All right, Kevin, what you got for us this week?
It is a blog post from the We Love Weather folks and Marshall Shepard at the Weather Channel, and it has several discussions of the often discussed probability of precipitation and what does that mean? Several different explanations.
We could do a whole show on that. We could do a whole show on that.
If you're not feeling at all confused, go and read this post.
Yeah, I mean, wow.
Pops even matter. I mean, does it even matter? It's never gonna.
In the summer down here where we are with these air mass storms, no, it doesn't matter. All right, Bill Murray, what you got for us this week?
Yeah, Mr. Master of Ceremonies, I'm going to beg the foghorn for my pick. But I'm going to make up for it with all the incredible guests coming up on WeatherBrains. Thanks to Joe Woody for being with us tonight. Next week, we'll have the folks from the National Weather Association previewing the annual meeting in St. Louis. We'll be talking about the Ron and the famous Weather Service forecaster Ron Prebilinsky. We'll be talking about him with some other things. Art Faulkner from the Alabama, former emergency manager. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. James, you can correct me, but he'll be talking about manufactured housing and some of the issues that have appeared lately in terms of safety.
That's going to be a good episode.
So that's going to be a really good show. Dr. David Bodine will join us on the 20th. We'll be live from the NWA in St. Louis on the 27th. And we'll come back with the author, Dr. Jack Davis, who's written an incredible book about the American Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico. Marshall Shepard joined us on the 10th. Hey, Joe, do you remember the book by Gary Allen Fine several years ago about forecasting? Do you remember that book?
Don't remember it off the top of my head. Don't tell the author.
Yeah, that's going to be a really fun one. And then Ben Pringle and Jay Prater and maybe some other retirees. That's going to be the retirement home version of WeatherBrains. September on Monday, September.
I'm actually on vacation that week, so you guys have fun.
Yeah.
So our nurse
all right, Joe.
All the retirees.
Yeah.
You're going to have to get some rocking chairs, and we all sit back. Hey, remember the storm?
I remember that one back in 67.
Okay, all right. Here's my pick of the week. It's the NASA app, Earth Now, and you can look at temperature and sea ice and a whole bunch of different things. It's called Earth Now, a NASA app.
Is that the one that you can have as your background and it changes from like day to night and you see all the city lights come up?
Don't think so.
Okay. Because I've had that at one.
That app looks cool. So Joe, how much does it cost?
It's free. Your tax dollars at work, sir.
Wow. All right. I'm downloading that sucker. I'm downloading that sucker right now. Hey, Joe, thanks so much for being on the show. Hey. You were a great guest. This has been awesome. The time has flown. It's just like we just started. Now we got to wrap it up here. So thanks for coming on the show this week. It was awesome to have you.
Thank you. I had great fun. And thanks, Bill. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Audrey. Good to see you all. Bye-bye.
Yeah. And here's the deal. If you want to get in touch with us, it's email@weatherbrains.com. Our social media accounts are up on the website as well. But typically we're on the air Monday nights. This is a Thursday night special. But if you'd like to watch it live, you can watch it at live.bigbrainsmedia.com. Monday nights, 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. And, of course, the podcast is released every early Tuesday morning. So that's it. It's a wrap. On behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Joe.
Great show. Thanks,
Joe.
everybody.
Good show.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye. Love